She said it loud enough for the whole table to hear. That was intentional. Everything Vanessa does at a volume like that is intentional. She has a gift for it. The smile that softens the delivery just enough to give herself deniability. The timing that catches everyone mid-bite, so the silence lands perfectly. The way she tilts her head like she's sharing something she's reluctant to say. She's been doing this since we were children, and I have watched the mechanism for 40 years, and I still feel it land, every time. "Enjoy the beach house while you can," she said, reaching for her mimosa. Before the foreclosure people changed the locks. The table went quiet. Not completely. There was still the clink of someone setting down silverware, the faint music from the restaurant speakers, the sound of the Gulf outside the window. But the conversation stopped, and heads turned, and I felt the familiar heat of being the one everyone is looking at in the specific way of people who aren't sure whether to be sympathetic or relieved it isn't them. My mother looked at me with the expression she uses when she's embarrassed by something I've done, which was interesting because I hadn't done anything. My father studied his eggs Benedict. Two cousins exchanged a glance across the table. Vanessa's fiancé, a man named Garrett who works in insurance and has always looked slightly uncertain about everything, sat very still. I looked at my phone, which was face down next to my water glass. I almost laughed. Tell me where you're watching from if you've ever had families celebrate your struggles. Because I want to hear from you, and because what happened next is the part I've been waiting to tell for a long time. Let me back up. Because the brunch scene is the ending of a longer story, and the longer story matters. I bought the beach house 8 years ago, before my marriage fell apart, when things looked different than they turned out to be. It's on the Gulf Coast, 3 bedrooms, good bones, a back deck that faces the water, the kind of place that costs you in cash but pays you back in something that doesn't have a number on it. My ex-husband and I thought we were building something. We were building different things, as it turned out, and when the divorce was finalized, I was left with the house and a mortgage that looked very large against my newly single income. I work in commercial property investment. I know how to read a balance sheet. I understood exactly how exposed I was. The first 2 years after the divorce were the kind of financial years you don't talk about at family brunches. The ones where you look at numbers at 11 at night and breathe very carefully and make decisions about what to cut and what to hold. I held the house. Everything else was negotiable. The house was not. Vanessa had opinions about this. Vanessa has always had opinions about the beach house, in the specific way of someone who wants something they can't quite admit they want. From the time I bought it, she found ways to bring it up that were just slightly sideways. Too big for one person, too expensive, too risky, too far from practical things. When the divorce happened, she escalated. She told our mother the house was going to bankrupt me. She told Garrett, apparently, that I would probably have to sell within the year. She told people at a family gathering I didn't attend that I was really struggling with the beach house situation, which I know because a cousin told me afterward, unprompted, with the look of someone delivering information they feel is owed. She followed the property on one of those real estate sites. I know this because the site tells you who's viewed a property if you have an account. Her name came up 14 times over 3 years. 14 times. What Vanessa was not aware of through any of this was the trajectory of my work. The years I'm describing, the ones that looked like struggle from the outside, were also the years I was building the investment side of my practice into something significant. Late nights, early calls, 3 deals I was certain were going to fall through that didn't. I was not buying flashy things. I was not posting about anything. I was moving money deliberately in a direction that, after 6 years of quiet, consistent effort, resulted in me having enough to do something I had been working toward since the day I signed the mortgage. I called Derek Holloway, my financial advisor, in January. I told him I wanted to pay off the beach house in full. He looked at my accounts and the current balance and he said, "You can do it. Do you want to?" I said yes. We spent 3 weeks making sure the timing was right, and the wiring instructions were correct, and that nothing was going to surprise me. The wire went out at 9:47 that morning. The confirmation came through at 10:12, while I was sitting in my car in the restaurant parking lot fixing my lipstick before brunch. $1,200,000. Wire completed. Mortgage balance, 0. I read it twice. Then I went inside and ordered a mimosa and sat down and listened to Vanessa tell the table that the bank was taking my beach house. Subscribe if you enjoy stories where quiet people finally stop being everyone's punching bag. Because I had been quiet for a very long time. She didn't stop at the first comment. She never does. The first comment is always the opening bid. She says the thing, watches how people react, and if nobody pushes back, she keeps going because silence reads as permission. I'm just being honest, she said, when my mother shot her a look that was more about timing than content. She's been struggling with that property for years. We all know it. I actually heard from someone at the title company that there's been some activity on the account. She looked at me. Maybe now you'll finally admit you can't afford that place. I should tell you something about Vanessa's finances. Not to be unkind, but for context, Vanessa lives in a way that photographs well and balances poorly. The car she drives is leased. The handbag she brings to every family gathering was discussed openly on the ride to brunch because Garrett mentioned the payment plan. She has a very curated Instagram that gives the impression of a life that, from what I can observe, is roughly 40% imaginary. This is not a judgment. People do what they do. But it is relevant that the woman announcing my financial failure was currently financing her own sunglasses. Someone at the title company, I said. That's interesting. I'm just saying what I heard. What you heard was mortgage activity, I said. That's accurate. She looked satisfied. My mother looked at the table. Garrett found something outside the window to look at. There was a wire transfer this morning, I said. I picked up my phone. I opened the confirmation. I set the phone on the table screen up and I slid it toward the center where everyone could see it. The amount was clearly visible. The payee was clearly visible. The memo line said, "Final payoff, mortgage account." The timestamp said, 10:12 a.m. I watched Vanessa read it. I watched the expression on her face do several things in rapid succession. The confusion first, then the recalculation, then something that I can only describe as the specific panic of someone who built an entire performance on a foundation that just disappeared. Someone at the far end of the table said, quietly, "Holy hell." My mother's mouth opened and closed. Garrett looked at Vanessa with an expression I recognized as the look of a man revising his understanding of the woman he is engaged to. "You paid it off," my mother said finally. Not quite a question. "This morning," I said. The wire went through around 10. Vanessa set down her mimosa. Her hand wasn't entirely steady when she did. I didn't. I had heard. "You heard there was activity on the mortgage account," I said. There was. I paid it off. I picked my phone back up and set it next to my plate. $1,000,002. Cleared this morning. The table was quiet for a long moment. Here is the part one didn't say out loud, but that I want to say now because this is the part that matters most. Vanessa has wanted that house since I bought it. Not the house exactly. What she wanted was the story of having it. She had told Garrett, I found out later through a cousin who felt she owed me the information, that if my financial situation got bad enough the family might be able to step in on the property. She had talked about what furniture she'd want to change. She had shown Garrett photos of the back deck and said they could use it for their engagement party once things resolved. She had built an entire imaginary future on the premise that I was going to fail, and she had been updating that future every time she checked the real estate site. 14 times. I thought about saying all of that at the table. I decided not to. Not because I was protecting her, but because it wasn't necessary. The phone on the table had already said everything that needed to be said, and adding more would have been for my satisfaction rather than for the truth, and the truth was already doing enough work on its own. You spent years deciding I was losing, I said. I said it quietly, the way you say things when you're certain of them. I wasn't losing. I was working. She didn't respond. I don't think she had a response that was available to her in that moment. Honestly, what would you have said at that table? Because I want to know in the comments. I finished my brunch. The food was good. The Gulf was visible through the restaurant windows. gray-green and moving slowly the way it does in the mornings before the wind comes up. I ate my eggs and I drank my coffee, and I listened to the conversation slowly restart around me, careful and slightly different in register than before, the way conversations are when something has shifted and people are figuring out the new arrangement. My mother pulled me aside before we left and said, "I didn't know." "I know," I said. "You should have said something. To let us know you were doing well." I thought about that. About the years I hadn't said anything. About the choice I'd made a long time ago to stop trying to correct people's assumptions about me because the energy cost of correcting them was higher than the benefit, and because I had eventually come to understand that people who want to believe something will find reasons to believe it regardless of what you show them. "I'm saying it now," I said. The next morning I was at the beach house before sunrise. I make coffee in the kitchen that I own, and I take it to the back deck, and I sit with it while the sky goes from gray to pink to the specific pale gold that happens right before full light. The Gulf is very quiet at that hour. The birds start around 5:30, and then the light comes, and then the day arrives. I've been sitting on this deck for 8 years. Through the marriage and the end of the marriage and the years of careful financial work and the 14 times my sister checked this property on a real estate website waiting for me to fail. I was here for all of it. Not loudly. Not in a way that photographed well or generated comments. Just here, doing the work, 1 year at a time. The mortgage disappeared that morning. So did my need for their approval, which had been disappearing slowly for years, and which, that morning, was finally entirely gone. She wanted to watch me lose this house so badly that she forgot to notice I'd already won. That's the thing about building something quietly. People mistake the quiet for weakness. They mistake the patience for stalling. They look at what you're not saying and decide it means you have nothing to say. I had plenty to say. I just waited until exactly the right morning to say it.